Reggie was just tying his shoe. That's how it started, ordinary, forgettable, safe. He was crouched at the base of the stairwell behind the cafeteria, backpack slung off one shoulder, when he looked up and saw them 3 boys circling her again. Same cracked concrete, same stale smell of mop water and spoiled milk, but something in the air felt off. Not dangerous, not yet, just wrong. Like the scene was folding in on itself in quiet, invisible ways. Her name was Autumn. She never cried, never talked back, never flinched. But today, something was different. The tallest one grabbed her collar like he was yanking open a coat that didn't belong to him. That's when everything stopped. No wind, new cafeteria buzz. Even the birds vanished. And then she looked straight at Reggie. Not at the bullies, not at the stairwell. At him. Her lips moved, but the sound didn't travel right. It hit him, inside, like a memory or a forgotten voice that didn't belong in the now. He swears, she said. Do you remember the fire? That's when the sky flickered. Just for a blink, like a dying light bulb in a motel hallway. Ty froze mid-laugh, his hand still clenched in her collar. The other 2 staring past her like they saw something walking up behind them. But there was nothing. Just air, empty vibrating air. What happened next isn't on any school security footage. The district wiped the tapes. The teachers never spoke about it. Parents were told it was a heatstroke incident. But Reggie remembers watching as Ty's hands let go before she even touched him. As if something peeled his fingers back one by one, like some invisible hand had reached through the world and rearranged it in silence. He screamed, fell to the ground like a puppet whose strings were sliced. The others ran. Autumn didn't. She just stood there, smoothing the front of her shirt, like it was all beneath her. Like she knew this wasn't the first time. That night, Reggie couldn't sleep. He kept replaying her words. Do you remember the fire? He thought it was nonsense. Until 3:07 a.m., when his baby sister, barely 2 years old, sat up in her crib, stared at him through the cracked door, and whispered a name. His grandmother's name. The one who burned to death in 1996. The one no one in his family ever mentioned, and the voice she used. It wasn't hers. It was Autumn's. So now, here's the question no one has dared to ask but you just did. By watching this, what if the bullies weren't the ones who started it? What if Autumn was never the victim? And what if everything you've been told about her was designed to keep you from remembering what she truly is? Because someone went missing the next day. Not a student, the vice principal. And the last thing he said before vanishing, she's not a girl, she's a warning. Reggie didn't sleep the next night. Not really, not with the door cracked, just enough to keep watch. Not with his little sister rolling in her crib and mumbling her name in a voice too slow, too old, too empty. It wasn't that he was scared of Autumn, he wanted to be. That would have made sense. But what rooted itself deeper in his chest, tight behind the ribs, was something worse than fear, recognition. He knew her voice, not from school, not from detention or roll call or some locker room story, but from somewhere older, somewhere, buried, a smoke-choked hallway, a door with no handle. Screams that sounded like they were coming from the next room but were actually right behind him. He couldn't explain it, not out loud, not even to himself. But he knew he'd heard her. Before, long before today, at 3:28 a.m., the baby monitor crackled. Not just static, a phrase, garbled, short, looping. Do you remember the FDU? Then silence, then laughter. Not his sister's. He unplugged the monitor and went to her room. She was asleep, curled up tight, tiny chest, rising slow and calm. No sign she'd ever been awake. But the window, unlatched, and the night air smelled like burnt plastic. When he mentioned it the next morning, his mom just blinked at him over her coffee. We don't have a monitor, Reggie. We haven't since she turned 1. He didn't argue, just stared at the unplugged device in his hand. That was the first day he started filming himself. Just small things, a time-stamped journal in video form. August 4th, 2025, 10:27 a.m. He'd whisper into the phone, still feel like something's missing. Still feel like I'm watching my life instead of living in it. Sometimes he'd film the hallway, sometimes his own hands, just to see if they changed. Sometimes the inside of his closet, as if waiting for something to appear. That afternoon, a second figure re-entered his orbit. Her name was Lacey. That's what she said. Anyway, said she transferred from a school across the river, Trenton Heights. No record of her in the system, no social media, no last name, but she had a way of speaking that made everything else stop. Like whatever you were about to say would come out wrong if she looked at you too long. I know what you saw, she said, pressing a Polaroid into his palm beneath the bleachers. It showed the moment Ty grabbed Autumn's collar, caught on cheap, dusty film. But here's the thing, Autumn wasn't in it. The boys were mid-motion, frozen in attack stance, but the center was just void. No distortion, no blur, just ... absence. Where did you get this? Reggie asked, already regretting it. Lacey shrugged. I didn't take it. I found it, buried in the crawlspace under B Hall, wrapped in plastic, like it was supposed to wait for someone to come looking. He wanted to laugh, wanted to call it fake, but something about her voice too casual. Tim practice made the hairs on the back of his neck spike. "Why are you telling me?" he asked. She just smiled, that lazy half-smile that never reached her eyes. "Because you already know what's real. I'm just here to remind you what they erased." That night, Reggie found a file on his phone that wasn't there before. A video, no title, no metadata, no timestamp, just a clip. It showed him, sleeping, from inside his room. Except the perspective it wasn't from the door. It was closer. Too close. Like whoever recorded it was crouched beside his bed, watching the final frame of the video stay, just a flicker. But when he froze, it zoomed in, enhanced the exposure. Autumn's eyes stared back from the dark. The next morning, he walked to school with a rock in his backpack. Not for self-defense. He didn't know why he brought it. Only that it made him feel like he could act, if the moment came. But the day passed, in an eerie haze. Nu vice principal. Autumn absent. Even Lacey vanished after second period. He checked his phone again. The file was gone. No trace. Even his own journaling videos, the ones he'd been recording for a week, were missing, all but one. A single clip remained. The very first one. But the voice in it wasn't his. It was Autumn's, whispering something too soft, too jumbled to understand. Except for one line that echoed like a needle slipping across a vinyl record. "They won't let you leave unless you remember who lit the match." Reggie hadn't thought about the house in years. The one that burned down when he was 6. The one the family never talked about. They'd called it an electrical fire. But sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he remembered things that didn't fit the report. A woman screaming inside the house, except all the windows had been blown out. Flames curling upward, then sucking inward. Like the house wasn't being consumed by fire, but taking it in. He started noticing gaps in people's conversations. Friends referencing things they swore he was part of, but he had no memory. Yearbook photos where he stood smiling beside people he didn't recognize. Then came the dream. The hallway again. Same door, with no handle, same smoke. And this time, someone knocked from the inside. 3 slow, hollow knocks. Then, "Reggie, stop filming. It's remembering you now." He woke up with bloody fingernails. Scratched his own palms raw in the night. Lacey appeared again, 2 days later, uninvited, in his house, sitting on the couch beside his sister, who stared blankly at the wall. "She's not asleep," Lacey whispered, stroking the little girl's hair. "She's just waiting. Kids always remember first. They just can't explain it yet." He asked who she was really. She said, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you, but you might believe it when you hear your own voice saying it." Then she handed him a cassette tape, labeled in pencil, "New before." He didn't own a cassette player, but his grandmother did, the one who died in the fire. He found it in a box in the basement, dusted it off, plugged it in, pressed play, and there it was. His own voice, younger, maybe 5 or 6 years old, chanting something over and over. "Don't go upstairs, don't go upstairs, don't go." Static. A scream, then Autumn's voice. Calm, clear. She made him do it, and now she wants him back. Then silence. The player shorted out and smoked. He hasn't told anyone this part. Not his mom, not the school. But this morning, when he opened the fridge, the milk was gone. The juice was gone. Everything had been replaced with blank cassette tapes. Stacked, labeled, sealed, each one with a date. Each date tied to a fire. Fires he remembers seeing on the news. Fires he never connected to each other. House, library, foster home, church. But the label on the final tape chilled him more than anything. It wasn't dated, just titled, "Tonight." And under that, in scrawled shaky pen, Lacey tells him the truth. But Lacey hasn't come back. Not yet. And now he's not sure she ever existed. Because he finally checked the school transfer records for Trenton Heights. There was a Lacey, but she died in a fire. In 2009, at the same house. Where his grandmother lived, where everything started. The part that's eating him alive. She died trying to save someone, a 6-year-old boy. His name was Reggie, but he didn't die. At least, not all of him. The question now isn't what Autumn is, or even who Lacey was. The question is, what part of Reggie died that day, and what took its place? Ask ChatGPT. He thought it was over when he found the photograph. The real one, not the glitchy Polaroid Lacey gave him, but a high-gloss archival print buried inside an old librarian's copy of the Fire Investigation Handbook, wedged behind a shelf no one had touched in over a decade. It wasn't labeled, didn't need to be. The moment Reggie saw it, something in his gut twisted. It showed the burned remains of a child's bedroom. Walls blistered black. A melted plastic doll on the floor. But what made him freeze was the window still intact, untouched by fire, bearing a faint reflection. A face. His face. Not older, not younger, just still. Like it had been waiting there all this time. He brought the photo to Ms. Garrison, the oldest teacher at school. Taught home SI for 30 years. Quiet, soft-spoken, but her fingers trembled when she took the photo from his hands, and for a second, Reggie swore her eyes welled up with something like guilt. "I saw you once," she whispered, Back then, they said you didn't survive, but I saw you, in the fire, standing still, not screaming, just watching. He begged her to explain, to fill in the missing years, the memory glitches, the ghosts wearing familiar skin. And for a moment, a blessed moment, it seemed like she would see poured him tea, closed the blinds, sat across from him with the heaviness of someone who'd been carrying a secret so long it had calcified inside her. You were one of the Bramble Street kids, she began. That house wasn't just any house. It was the one built over the fault line, the old asylum boundary. That's why they knocked it down in the 60s. But they never cleared the land, just paved over it, turned it into homes. Family homes. She pulled a box from her closet. News clippings, medical files, taped over VHS recordings, years of quiet obsession, hidden truth, a pattern of fires starting in 1962, recurring every 13 years, always involving a child who claimed to hear whispers behind the walls. Reggie scanned a headline from 1975. Boy draws map of room that doesn't exist, days before house burns. Down another from 1988. Girl disappears during fire drill, found sitting in ashes, eyes burned shut. Each incident was tied to the same geographic point. Each child reported the same hallucination, a hallway with no end, a door with no knob, a voice whispering their name backwards. Ms. Garrison handed him one last envelope, inside a tape, labeled in faded ink, Reggie only, if he remembers. For a moment, everything clicked. The fires, the memory lapses, Lacey, Autumn, even the voice from the baby monitor. They weren't random. They were echoes of something buried in the floorboards of that first house, something calling out every 13 years to those who remembered too much. He went home and played the tape. It opened with a flicker of static, then cut to home video footage. Him as a child, his grandmother cooking in the kitchen, Lacey in the background, younger, smiling. He watched himself running through the hall, laughing, alive. And then the screen twitched. Just slightly. A momentary blur, hard to notice, unless you were looking for it, and in that glitch, something was wrong. He paused, rewound. There, between frames 728 and 730, in the reflection of the hallway mirror, his face changed. Just for a blink, not older, not younger, but blank, like someone had erased the features and forgotten to redraw them. That's when his stomach turned. He checked the date, stamp on the tape, 1996. But Reggie was born in 1999. He stared at the screen in silence, throat tightening, skin cold. It didn't make sense. He was alive in the video. That was clearly him, but the math didn't fit. None of it did. He went back to the school files, searched birth records, found the file for Reginald Hugh Miller, born March 3, 1999. But something was off. The photo was blank, the medical entries generic, every box stamped, reissued copy, and then, deeper in the archived system, an older file, locked behind outdated encryption. Reginald Hugh Miller, born November 1, 1990, died August 6, 1996. Cause asphyxiation, house fire. His name, his address, his grandmother. He stared at the screen, unblinking. You're not crazy, they lied to you. The panic didn't come all at once. It crept in sideways. Not fear, exactly, but displacement. The feeling that the floor beneath you is not the one you started on. That your voice isn't echoing the way it should. He checked the mirror, just to be sure, and for the first time, he noticed. His reflection wasn't blinking when he did. The next day, he tried to act normal, told no one, avoided eye contact. But the world had changed. The halls echoed too long. People's lips moved slightly out of sync. The class bell rang 2 seconds early. Every detail just off enough to unravel reality at the seams. And then Autumn came back. She stood in the center of the quad, the place where Ty grabbed her collar. Same black hoodie, same blank stare. But something behind her eyes was different, now resigned, like she knew it was too late to undo whatever had already begun. I tried to stop it, she said softly, but it already chose you. I was supposed to be the last. He asked her what it was. She just pointed at the janitor's closet near the cafeteria, the one no one used. Sealed off with police tape since the fire. You buried yourself in there, she said, and something else crawled out with your name. He didn't go there, not that day, but that night, his mother found him digging through the backyard, dirt up to his elbows, hands shaking. What are you looking for? She asked. He didn't know how to answer, not until he pulled out a rusted lunchbox from beneath the soil, inside of which were photographs. Of him, a dozen versions, same face, different ages. Some of them older than he was now. Some much, much older. One of him, as a man in a 1940s military uniform. One in black and white, standing beside a Model T, always the same eyes, always the same scar, above the brow right where he'd hit his head in the fire. He looked up that his mother was crying. You weren't supposed to live this long, she whispered. They said you'd forget. They promised you would, and then she backed away like she didn't trust him, like she didn't trust what he was anymore. That night, the baby monitor turned on by itself. His sister's voice came through. Reggie, yes, I remember the hallway. He didn't respond. Then, a second voice, older, male, Familiar. You left me behind. Reggie. He turned toward the sound. It wasn't coming from the monitor anymore. It was coming from inside the closet. When he opened the door, nothing was there, except a charred doorframe, ash beneath his feet, and a hallway that should not have existed stretching impossibly deep into the dark. Flickering lights, no sound, and at the end, just barely visible, himself. But not now. Not 17-year-old Reggie. Older, different, smiling, holding a burned match and whispering the final words of the tape. It wasn't the fire that killed you, it was the part of you that opened the door. And now, you'll have to watch the whole thing again, because none of this started with Autumn. Not with Lacey, not even with the house. It started the day Reggie died, and forgot. The first sign he wasn't alone came 3 days after the hallway appeared in his closet. Reggie hadn't stepped through it yet. He couldn't. Something in his spine told him the moment he did, nothing would come back with his name. But he couldn't stop staring, couldn't stop counting the flickers in the overhead light, or the way the temperature dropped by 2 degrees every time he stood near the threshold. What he hadn't noticed, what no one notices when they're standing too close, was that someone else was already watching him. It started small. A sticky note slid under his door while he slept. Blank at first glance, but when he held it under his desk lamp, ink bloomed from the paper like it had been hiding beneath the surface. Afraid to speak. You were right all along. Don't trust your reflections. Look at the scar. The scar, above his eyebrow, the one he got from the fire. Except, he'd never told anyone about that. The official story was he fell off his bike. There was even a hospital report, but the handwriting on that note, it was his sloppier, a little tilted left, like how he used to write before the fire. He didn't know where to go, who to ask. Autumn was gone again. Lacey hadn't reappeared since she handed him the tape, but something was still communicating. That night, in a dream that didn't feel like a dream, he found himself standing in the school auditorium. Empty chairs, stage lights buzzing, no sound, only the feeling of being watched. Then he saw the mothers, lined along the back wall. Not moving, not blinking, but aware. Their faces weren't clear, slightly blurred, like a memory you don't quite trust. Each wore the same hoodie, black threadbare, on the chest, a symbol, a circle. Inside it, a jagged line splitting the center. He woke up gasping, heart racing, drew the symbol from memory. When he got to school, he saw it carved into the locker beside his shallow, faint, as if scratched by someone afraid of being caught. The next sign was in the announcements. The school intercom crackled during lunch midway through a roll call and, for exactly 6 seconds, played what sounded like audio in reverse. At first he thought it was garbled, static, until he slowed it down later that night. Played backward. It wasn't random. It was a phrase, spoken softly, like a secret, passed through time. We're still here. You just don't know which ones. We are. He started noticing others. Not directly, but patterns. For students who always left class at the exact same time, never spoke, sat in the same corner of the library. Hands still, eyes downward. One of them, a girl with a jagged pixie cut and the same burn scar on her wrists, lit him a folded napkin when they passed in the hallway. Inside, a Polaroid dot. It showed him, but not now. It showed a shot from above like surveillance from outside. His house, dated 2005. He was on a tricycle. Front wheel tilted, staring directly into the lens. At 5 years old. Before any fire, before the second birth certificate, before the lie. The caption on the back read, "Your mother's not your mother. Check the yearbook." He pulled out his mom's old high school yearbook that night, flipped to the class of '92, scanned the pages until he saw her. Rebecca, same eyes, same smile, except the name beneath the photo wasn't Rebecca Miller. It was Rebecca Holloway, and she wasn't listed as a student. She was listed as a faculty aide, a mental health counselor for students who'd experienced traumatic hallucinations, the ones they quietly called the recall kids. Most were listed as withdrawn, some as deceased. One, circled in red, increginald, Hugh Miller, was noted as never enrolled. No public record. He felt his mouth go dry. Memory glitch. Hidden truth. What the government never released. He returned to school the next morning to find his locker had been removed. Not emptied, removed. An entire row of lockers now replaced. With drywall, like it had never existed. He approached the front office, but the receptionist smiled too wide and said he must have always had a bottom locker on the other side. No one remembered the old row. No one remembered his combination. Even his textbooks had vanished. That night, another sticky note. Memory isn't lost, it's edited. You were version 3.2. They kept erasing until you stuck. He didn't sleep. Instead, he walked the city in the dark, trailing the route he used to take to his grandmother's house. Most of it was different now: developments, new stores, the dead street lamps replaced. But one alley hadn't changed. He turned into it, found the old storm drain behind the chain-link fence. And then, under the drainage pipe carved into the brick in a child's handwriting, half erased by moss. We died here. We just forgot. How? He started hearing the phrase whispered in crowded spaces, in grocery stores, on buses, in classrooms. always just behind him, always soft, as if the people around him weren't people anymore, but recordings waiting to play the right line. And then, the observer came. He wasn't like the others. No hoodie, no symbol, just a man in a corduroy jacket, thick glasses, and an expression that never changed. He found Reggie on the bleachers after school, the place where autumn first broke reality. Sat beside him like a shadow returning home. "I was there the first time you died," he said without looking at him. "I documented it. Every version, every loop, every restart. You've come further than any of them." Reggie didn't speak. The man handed him a manila envelope, heavy, thick. Inside, copies of surveillance stills, fragments of therapy transcripts, photographs of children staring into mirrors with blank eyes. But the worst page was a chart. Names, dates, versions, 22 in total. Only 2 marked, sustained. Autumn, Reggie. They only ever hold if they forget what they saw behind the door. The man said, his voice dry like it had been rehearsed. "Too many times, but you looked twice. That's when it begins watching you." He stood to leave, then paused. "Check your footage. Frame 42, you'll see what you missed." Then he walked away. Reggie ran home, dug through his archived files, opened his oldest recorded video, the first one he made after the baby monitor incident, slowed it, frame by frame. At frame 42, he froze. There, behind his reflection in the mirror, just for a blink, was a second version of himself, wearing the same clothes, same scar, but staring back, smiling, holding a burned match, and on his wrist, the jagged circle symbol, drawn in blood. He stumbled backward, opened the closet. The hallway was still there. Longer now, dimmer. But at the very end, just visible, 20 figures now stood, each one with his face, each one waiting, each one watching. There was never just one version of Reggie. There were attempts, rewrites, broken loops, memory failures. The truth wasn't that he survived the fire. It was that he didn't, and something needed him to keep trying until he remembered the thing he wasn't supposed to see. But now you're seeing it, too. You've seen the symbol. You've heard the voices. You've caught the audio glitches, the memory gaps, the contradictions. You're part of this now, because you were watching when Reggie looked at frame 42, and someone's already slipped the note under your door. The hallway doesn't just exist in his closet, it's wherever memory breaks, wherever something bigger is trying to come through, wherever you realize this isn't fiction. Just something buried, waiting for you to look again. So the question now isn't whether Reggie will step through. The question is, have you already?